companies that could eventually be, would have the resources actually to do major transactions, we probably lost at about 50%. So there are so there are fewer, much fewer companies today than what we had 10 years ago. So it's very risky if you, as a business model, you like to, to think that eventually you will, as Gary Pisano was saying this morning, to flip over your companies, because the question mark is, would one of these people be around and interesting enough to buy your technology? Now, clearly, public funding, and when I talk about public funding, I'm not referring to government funding. These are funding available for public companies. It's very tough in Europe. And clearly, there is a clear difference, and actually the gap is becoming wider with the United States. Even though there was a crisis in the United States, you see much more activity, financial activities in the United States, even in terms of an IPO than in Europe. Now, funding of European companies requires extenuating circumstances, local hero funding, and actually I wrote these after I read the news of Nycox was able to raise a very significant amount of money, but keep in mind that 25 million came from the French government. So it really requires a substantial commitment by the, by the local authorities. Private funding is very difficult, and believe me, I'm actually in the middle of a fundraising, and certainly I had a much better life 10 years ago. I think the problem is that, in particular, VCs are confused. Where is the exit? IPO is not an exit anymore, because first of all, there's no IPO window. Even if there is an IPO window, it's not an exit for venture capital because there's no liquidity. So I would be actually interested in hearing comments from the Assobiotec or the Pricewaterhouse, whether, in my opinion, is such a rough environment that we should already expect that the number of new companies are much less than what we experienced a few years ago. Obviously, the difficult market environment at the very significant consequences for many companies. Among these companies in the United States, you'll see a lot of companies that are filed for Chapter 11, so that means bankruptcy. And Europe starts to have its own casualties. I was reading the other day about Decode Genetics, one of the largest European companies, Icelandic companies, that have just filed for bankruptcy. And unfortunately, we see no ending to these difficulties in funding in Europe. And we should not forget, actually, that these started before Lehman. So it was a process that specific for the biotech, even before the generalized economic crisis. Now, the number of institutes with interest has rapidly declined. This is really dramatic. 30% of the ventures that have invested in BioXcells are not there any longer, either because they are not being able to raise money, or because they're going to, or like a large pension fund, who simply decide not to allocate money to the biotech sector any longer. So yes, big pharma biotech still wants a product, but it's difficult because there, as I said, there are a lot of products around, and it's certainly a difficult market. So I'm going to finish up with the next couple of slides, and it's a question for you, but also for myself. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? I don't think we don't know. Certainly, as I said, note of optimism comes from the fact that pharma biotech still are cash rich, and they have money to fund new projects. So this new wave of corporate ventures is definitely interested. There are plenty of disease to be treated. Whether this is enough to to fill the gap is clearly a question mark. Where this is enough to instill new confidence in private public investors, two question marks. And whether this will facilitate a new waves of companies, three question marks. And I'd like to finish up with, the question mark is, are we doing too little, and is it too late? And here is the lawyer who actually gave the stay of execution to the prisoner who was being already executed. So that's that's what we need to ask ourselves. Thank you very much.